Now, moving on to France, where we're seeing the country's sharpest economic contraction since World War II. The news comes after a 6-week lockdown, which has left shops shuttered and consumers hunkered down at home. And France is not alone, of course. The Eurozone economy has also contracted at its fastest pace on record. Because of the coronavirus pandemic, the European Central Bank, for its part, has said that it will ramp up its stimulus measures to support recovery. Our business editor, Kate Moody, joins us from Paris. Kate, thank you so much for being with us this evening. Now, the slowdown was not expected, and actually analysts are saying that it could get quite a bit worse.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that has been in the works since we saw the coronavirus arriving in Europe. The lockdowns, of course, were only in effect for a few weeks of that first 3-month period of the year, and that means that the greater damage is likely to show up in the current second quarter. Let's take a look at the data. The Eurozone as a whole contracted 3.8%. That's deeper than the cuts during the worst of the financial crisis a decade ago. France has plunged into recession after shrinking 0.1% at the end of last year. It's down 5.8% for this first quarter of 2020. Italy's economy fell 4.7%, also into recession. Spain down 5.2%. Germany hasn't published quarterly data, but it's forecasting negative growth of 6.3% for the year as a whole. The European Central Bank says the bloc could shrink by anywhere between 5 and 12% in 2020, depending on the success of the containment measures and stimulus. Now, on Thursday, the ECB kept its main interest rate on hold at negative 0.5%. It did further reduce lending rates for commercial banks, effectively paying them to borrow money and encouraging them to then lend it to households and businesses who need it. The bank is also continuing its €750 billion program buying government bonds. The ECB head Christine Lagarde saying that she was ready to increase those emergency support measures as much as necessary and for as long as needed. That was her quote. Now, governments have been borrowing huge amounts of money to support their own economies. Here in France, for example, it's a €110 billion program for now, including 24 billion for the state-sponsored subsidies. Italy, meanwhile, has seen its credit rating cut because of the rising level of government spending and debt while its economy languishes. It's worth pointing out, on the heels of the news that the U.S. economy contracted 4.8% in the first quarter, that is compared to the same period from a year earlier, whereas the European figures are compared to the previous quarter. So it means that the European drop is actually even steeper than the ones that we've seen in the U.S.
Kate, I'd like to shift the attention from Europe to the U.S. now, if we can, where 3.8 million Americans lost their jobs last week.
Absolutely. It brings the total for the last 6 weeks since mid-March to 30 million people who've applied for unemployment benefits with the U.S. government. That 3.8 million does represent the 4th consecutive week of declining applications. It's still staggering numbers, really, and much more than had been predicted. The data suggests that layoffs are now extending to all sectors, not just those that are directly affected by the virus and lockdowns. It implies an overall unemployment rate of around 15% for now. Many of those people, of course, hoping to be rehired once the virus is brought under control. Now, a separate report of government data show U.S. government spending plunged 7.5% in March. That's the largest monthly drop on record. The average disposable income dropped by around 2% for the month as well. And again, analysts expect April to be far worse. Oxford Economics describing that plunge as a mere dip in the tip of the iceberg, rather. Even if people are able to get back to work quickly, many will have seen a drop in their income, in their savings, and in their confidence. This as the world's largest economy heads into recession.
Kate Moody there, our business editor, with that update. Thank you so much for being with us. Stay safe. Now for some good news from South Korea.